welcome to day 2 of Denver Tech Week. My name is Dan Malone. I will be your moderator today. I am the managing partner of Haynes & Boone. We are an international corporate law firm, and I am joined with my 3 esteemed panelists here who will give different perspectives on the entrepreneurial and investment side of Agtech and investing. And so we hope this will be an informal dialogue between the 3 panelists, and we welcome questions both at the end or during should you have any questions. So without further ado, let me introduce my esteemed panelists and let them talk a little bit about what they do, their perspective in the marketplace of investing in Agtech, and a little bit about their business. First, Jaleh Dai from Aurora Equity. She is the chairman of Ag Food Tech and the Band of Angels. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Jaleh Dai. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I'm delighted to join you in Denver. I haven't been here for a few years, so it was nice to have an excuse to come here. I am an investor, venture investor in food and ag tech, the whole spectrum. We invest across the board, along the value chain. But also at Aurora Equity, we invest in other things beyond ag tech. So I started as an academic for 20 years, and then I said I need a little bit more money to have a better lifestyle. So I went to private sector, and I've been doing this for the last 20 years. So I'm like a dinosaur here. So, but it's okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Nathaniel Jackson is the CEO of True Algae and will be providing more of the entrepreneurial side of the discussion. Welcome.
Along with my colleague here as well. So I'm Nathaniel Jackson. I'm the CEO of True Algae. It's a great pleasure to be here today in Denver. Our headquarters are actually based in the Washington, D.C. area, but we have a plant in Florida and we sell all over. Basically, at True Algae, we produce at scale an algal metabolite tea, which we add as a soil amendment. The problem we're trying to solve, essentially, is iron deficiency and other micronutrient deficiencies in the soil. It's a huge problem. About 1/3 of the world's farmland suffers from iron deficiency, and through metagenomic testing, we've found a way to help the iron uptake of various different plants. So I'm delighted to be here today. We can go into more details, but we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Great, thank you, Nathaniel. And last but not least, Kevin Baum is the CEO and co-founder of AgriWeb. He happens to be a local Denver native like myself. Kevin, welcome.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out tonight. Like I said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of AgriWeb. We actually started in Australia, where I lived for about 8 years, and I've moved over to Colorado in the past year, so it's great to be a little bit closer to where I grew up. So AgriWeb, the problem that we're trying to solve is that you go around farms everywhere in the world, and almost every single one of them is run and managed effectively by a notebook sitting in their top pocket. It's pen and paper. This is the world's original industry. It's the most fundamental industry in the world, and digital adoption is borderline non-existent. So we build software products. We're explicitly a software company, and our goal is to increase digital adoption on farm, get farmers to use data to run better businesses, to increase profitability, sustainability, and efficiency. And then also use that data to connect further up the value chain. We talk often in this industry around the world about how we need to solve for the environmental impact of farming. We need to talk about traceability. We need to give transparency to consumers about what they're eating. How can you do that when there is a black box at the source of production? That is staggering to me. I didn't come from farming. I barely stepped foot on a farm before I started this business, but I met a co-founder whose family did have a farm, and when he was talking about what was going on, and I went and saw for myself, I was blown away. So we started AgriWeb 8.5 years ago to try and solve this problem, and now we've got offices here and in London and in Australia, and operating in 20 countries around the world. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome. Before we get into a deeper dive, I always think it's good to get an investor landscape. Where are we at in the marketplace? Give us a short overview of the investment landscape, investor sentiment from the money side.
I'll give you the headline first. The headline is that Agtech, food tech, when I say Agtech, it includes the downstream food consumer-facing area, is doing pretty well. That's the headline. And so what are the facts and figures behind it? In 2021, the global investment in Agtech was about $52 billion. That is compared to about less than $500 million in 2010-11. So that is more than 100 times increase. Rate of growth is almost exponential. So that is very encouraging. And then another figure that I want to convey to you, when the public markets dived earlier this year and continue to stay down, public markets took their cue. Private markets took their cue, and they have gone down in terms of valuations and rate of funding. But Agtech has held pretty well. The valuation have come down slightly, but it's really interesting. When you peel the onion a little bit more, you would see the giant E and F rounds, that the billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar funding that was happening on the high end. Those are all but gone. But when you look at the lower end of the investment, the seed rounds, angel investors, A, B rounds, they are doing pretty much what they have been doing, even though the valuation at the seed round is not what it used to be, but they are still holding well.
And from the entrepreneurial perspective, what would you feel is your market sentiment? How do you feel the market right now is the reception to companies like yours in this marketplace?
Well, we're still finishing up our Series C2 round. We're several years behind you guys, but aspire to be where you are. Actually, we've seen, particularly amongst the angel groups, which we're still working with, quite a bit of interest. So we really haven't seen the downturn. I would agree with Jali. You see real compression at the later rounds, the bigger rounds, because they're closer to the public markets. So the public markets influence their pricing a lot more than you would see at the angel round. So we really haven't seen a real compression at the Series Seed level. However, I will say that there is some concern because the markets are a little bit shaky right now, and so there is a little bit more hesitation when you start initial discussions. But I think if you have a compelling story, you have the metrics to talk about, the data to back it up, there's still people are writing checks.
Kevin, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we actually just gone public with this yet, but we just closed a small round this summer, and what happened earlier in the year definitely caused people to pull back a little bit, but there's a lot of capital left to deploy, and the job of an investor is not to sit on. So, like you said, there's a lot of push on valuation, there's a lot of push on metrics, but I think if you have a good story to tell, there's definitely money out there. And these cycles happen. They've happened multiple times. Every 10 years or so, there's some big crunch, and it's making sure that you can do enough, be capital efficient, survive. If you can't get the round away now, this will end, and we will come out of it back to a better place.
As you guys are talking to potential investors, what are some common themes? Are people interested in investing in Agtech, or are they interested in investing in specific nuances that your business, or is it a combination of both?
I would say that when we talk to investors, they really want to understand what problem are you solving, and what are the current solutions, and why aren't they working? Why is your solution counterintuitive? Do you have the IP, which is, they want to know what problems you're solving. They also want to know the size of the market you're going after. If you're going after a relatively small niche market, there's not the real upside that they want to see, because VC is a grand slam business. It's a power law, driven by power laws. So they want to see the huge upside potential. And if you're just in a niche, it's hard to really justify that. So those are the types of questions that we get.
Kevin, how about you guys?
Yeah, I guess what I would say to that, in the venture world, I would agree. I think one thing I always try to impress on people is there's lots of ways to get funding. Venture capital is one. It solves a specific need. It's a very powerful source of funding, but not every company is a venture capital company.
Absolutely.
We recently received some grant funding. We've gone with angels. We've gone with family offices. There's people that have different investment profiles. There's people that are looking to create diversity in a type of portfolio. So in the venture round, you need to explain to them how you can be $1 billion company, because that is how venture math works. And if you can't, it's probably not the right place. And so in that case, you need to have a big market size. Thankfully, tech adoption in ag is still early, so there are a lot of big market sizes available. But if you're going for a niche product, ag is not huge, it's not SMB, consumer, so you can get very narrow. And if that's the case, that doesn't mean you despair on your company or pivot to something else. It just means understand the funding that's right for your profile business is how I think about it.
What are some successes that you guys have both had in getting the attention of a Jaleh or other type of investors, going from that concept to the discussion about let's talk about a partnership in investing?
Well, I can. First of all, I completely agree with what he's saying. There's a whole spectrum of different types of ways you can do financing. And when you're starting out, you're going to start out with friends and family, and you've got to prove
And fools.
And FFFs, friends, family, and fools, right? And hopefully not too much on the latter side, including ourselves. But in any event, yes, you start with just the initial funding to get your experiment and try to prove a few things, meet a few milestones for that audience, and then you move to angels and angel groups. Family offices also have mandates sometimes to support things which have a climate angle or an impact angle, and if you can work on that to get them on board. So yeah, you have to work it stage by stage, and again, you have to keep producing the right milestones, meet those milestones, and you're able to get to the next round of funding that way.
Yeah. One thing that was impactful for us, for a long time, we were beating our head against the wall with investors around, it felt like they were seeking a very particular, deep, specific solution. Like how do they press this button and have this immediate quantifiable impact to come out of it? And I think what we've seen flip is appreciation of what we're doing as a platform. We are a software product. We are big on the ecosystem. We've got about 10 new integrations we're about to roll out in the next month. And being able to aggregate that information and contextualize it didn't appeal 8 years ago, and now it's very exciting to people because there is a lot of amazing technology that struggles to get eyeballs or struggles to on the go-to-market side, but it doesn't mean it's not incredible IP. And so we've got a lot of mutually beneficial relationships where we can help those businesses get to market, help them get scale, but in the meantime we're getting perhaps a piece of data that's really valuable to our customer.
Sure. Jaleh, we've already established that the market is hot, that there is investor appetite. From your perspective, in talking to limited partners and other investors out there, what is the current appetite to do deals in terms of your perspective and investing in the fourth quarter with all the uncertainties that are out in the global marketplace?
LPs always are pushing you to deploy the funds. That's part of life. But I think now LPs want you to be more thoughtful. Deploy the funds, but don't just do willy-nilly because it's a hot area. What they're also thinking, if they're on the corporate side, what they want, because of the ESG rules and priorities in the public markets, they want to show that their corporation is compliant with all the ESG requirements. And also, most of them, in their heart, want to see good things being done, and they can do well by doing good kind of mentality. So but they really are cautious about where the money is going. They want to know, they do a little bit more thinking and due diligence about the companies that you're thinking about. They roll up their sleeve and look into it, help deeply with the due diligence as we do it, because they're a little bit more cautious. On the pension sides, and pensions are more stable kind of environment. They don't have quarterly reports, so to speak, as corporations do. So they are a little bit more patient. But again, the same applies. Everybody is concerned about public markets, where they're going, the interest rates, and also I think what we are beginning to see. I mean, I've been worried about geopolitical issues about 6, 7, 8 months ago. Now we are beginning to see both corporate and pensions are also concerned about geopolitical. And simply the fact that geopolitical issues brought the food shortage to the forefront, everybody is now looking at that as something to be thinking about. And their priorities for doing Agtech has actually increased because of the food shortages and displacements of distribution.
That's a great point. Like, one of the themes here is there are alternate sources of financing besides your true venture, but a subcategory of that is within the venture financing, you have very different types of investors. As Jaleh just said, you've got your corporate investors that may answer to different shareholder bases, disclosure requirements, and legal requirements, so that they may care about things very differently in a transaction than a very nimble, opportunistic fund that may not have those same guardrails on them. So we advise clients both who are investing and who are receiving money to understand your investor, to understand what makes them tick, to understand what they're regulated by, because we often see those investments go very differently from a large corporation that has a venture wing that is subject to very large SEC or global requirements versus a very nimble private equity or venture-backed fund that can get in, do its diligence, and get out very quickly. So that's just a very common sub-theme that we're seeing.
I want to touch on the first thing she said there because it's spot on. Is in terms of what shifts have I seen like recently and like really extremely is suddenly everyone cares about sustainability and ESG,
Right.
and they have no idea what it means or how they can figure it out, but they know it's a thing. And
Right.
I went to this Animal Agtech Summit in San Francisco in March this year, and I had gone to the same thing in 2017. 2017, it was just pharma and seed and fertilizer and all these, like, it was a very biological conference. This year, it was a carbon conference, and it was insane. I never seen
And
anything like
nobody knows what
and
that
nobody
is.
knows what it is, and nobody knows what it means. And I mean, we've got some of our customers. We work with Morrison's, who's a supermarket in the UK. Every single supermarket in the UK has made a net zero pledge by 2030 to 2035. And they made the pledge, and they turned around and they looked at their processors, and they're like, "Help us figure that out." And the processors are like, "What?" So there is a massive interest in valid ways of verifying sustainable practices on farms, sustainable supply chains, insetting versus offsetting. It's great to go buy a bunch of trees in Norway, but what these supermarkets are actually promising is that their supply chain itself will be carbon neutral. There's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of people making big claims that have very little science to back it. But there is an opportunity there if you can do it properly, the right way, with the producer, with the processor, with the supply chain.
I know I'm getting you late, but you're hitting on something that I've done. How many of you are familiar with what the state of Colorado has done on blockchain food safety?
I'm not.
That's good. So how many people are familiar with Jensen Farms in here?
I'm sorry?
Jensen Farms.
Jensen?
So about 12, 13 years ago, there was a listeria strain. You might have heard about it. Was when Rocky Ford County was killed, like 50 people, put 600 in the hospital. It was not Rocky Ford. It was Jensen Farms, Jensen Brothers in Grenada. Fast forward to today, what's happened? What you're talking about is happening in there's physical blockchain that's being applied to supply chain. It could back up some of your sustainability, it backs up food safety, does quicker root cause analysis on the state of Colorado, we've done 2 parts of the study. I've been involved in both parts of the legislation. I do have another Agtech background. We did a study on how to apply blockchain for food safety, which also does brand awareness. Think about Hatch chili versus Pueblo chili. That's exactly what you do, and also does that. So there's a lot of stuff happening also on a national level. Dr. Frank Gallianis used to be head of U.S. Food Safety from Walmart. Now he's head of USDA Food Safety.
So everything you're saying is happening right now. There's companies out there doing it.
Yeah,
And it's not smoke, and it's not snake oil, because I've seen the technology.
Well,
and
there
is a lot of snake oil.
Yeah, I'm saying there is a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of people that are latching onto the carbon theme in a way that's disingenuous. But what I would also say about that is I agree, there's a lot of great technology out there, but getting adoption at the producer level is really hard. And getting buy-in at the producer level, data, nothing is scarier in my experience in this industry than the concept of data. Producers do not want their data to be taken. They do not trust people to take their data. They certainly are not going to accept it from the government. So it has to be industry-led, and there can be pressures that come down. But even, I mean, we work with a business that is literally a processor in the UK that is buying our software and giving it to the farmer for free, and it is still a battle to get them to use it. So you know, there are some great technologies in the chain, but it's an end-to-end piece, and I think it's not going to be one technology that's going to solve it. It's going to have to be a lot of groups working together.
Have you seen what the way the blockchain community is talking about data privacy and analyzing that? And if not, and this was actually brought up in the study about how you can then resell some of your data. So people, every piece of the data, have you been educated about that?
I mean, I am sure that is the case, but that doesn't mean that going down the driveway and talking to Farmer Fred means he's going to buy that.
There was.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd like
Please,
to
yes.
ask you about what you see as the biggest problems that aren't being solved, and if it's okay.
Is there a roving microphone?
I'll speak. I'd like to hear from all 3 of you about big problems that are not being solved, that are opportunities, and I guess I'd especially like to focus on one area, which is, you know, JFK said farmers are the only people that buy at retail and sell at wholesale, and we've seen how much inflation has been such a big factor, especially in the supermarket, but most of that money is just sucked up by the supply chain and doesn't actually make it down to the farmer. And so the thing that I'm really interested in is how can we have all of this inflation that's brought all this new money into the system get actually to the producers who are still selling for rates that they don't even set.
Wow. Yeah, Jelly.
I had a hard time getting the whole. So could you just put your question in one sentence?
What's a big problem that's not being solved, especially around getting money out of the agriculture system to the actual producers?
So I got a question for you.
James,
or
let's let them
produce.
talk.
That's 2 parts. It could be protein or.
I'm going to answer his
Yes, I
question.
think-
So I think you are asking a very good question. And there are enormous problems in agriculture that can be solved by technology that would improve the margins for the farmer. And they're mostly upstream, mostly. So what we have seen in the last, I would say, 5-6 years, where zero cost of capital being zero, is being downstream agriculture, which is the consumer facing, you know, plant-based proteins, energy drinks, those sort of things. Much of the money has gone to the downstream. That doesn't improve the farmer's margins, does it? So what I advocate a lot, and as I speak up, I've got to a stage in my life that I don't have to be promoted for the next job. So I say things that other panelists usually don't say. And that is, who needs another mango flavored drink? What we need really, and I'm thinking macro, inflation, food shortages, crisis of water, all of this. It's upstream. I'm saying let's put our money behind technology that helps the upstream. Kevin is doing that. But as he does the upstream, he is helping with the co-ops and the packers and producers. And so I really want to see solutions for upstream farm management. We are not doing that as much as we should. So to give you a statistic, the $52 billion that was spent last year on Agtech investments, 60% of it was downstream, 40% was upstream. So every meeting that I go to, every panel, every keynote that I give, I just push the idea that let's put our money on the upstream problems and come up with solutions that improves the farmer's margin. Once the farmer sees that his or her margin is improved, they would adopt the technology. There is no question in my mind. I've been in the business of food and agriculture, whether I was a professor and now an investor. I know what farmers are hungry for. And actually, they don't get enough credit for being very open to adopting new technologies. But they only do it if it's integrated, so it's not piecemeal. You give me one software, you give me one hardware, and they don't speak to each other. They want things that actually integrates, solves problems, and improves their margin. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Upstream is supply and process, downstream is...
I'm sorry?
I'm just trying to understand upstream and downstream.
What is
upstream? What is
Okay,
downstream?
so if you look at the whole spectrum, agriculture to food, to restaurants, to food delivery, this is the downstream. So let's say after it gets out of the farm gate, so anything before the farm gate is upstream.
Got it.
After the farm gate, there is still upstream, and because you have to distribute it, you have to cool it, whatever. Once it gets into the grocery store and beyond, whether it's restaurant or food delivery, that's downstream. Drinks, plant-based protein, these are consumer-facing. That's what we call downstream.
I love everything you just said. I think that's
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
super biased,
but I'm
but-
going to buy you dinner because you love what I said.
No, it's 100% spot on. There's a lot of technology running around looking for a problem to solve, and people are like, oh, farmers are old and crotchety, they don't understand. It's like, no, they understand really well, actually. They understand that they have no margin, that all it takes is one change in climate conditions or one bad season and they could be out on their ass. So if you aren't actually delivering them value immediately, they're being smart to say, yeah, we'll pass, we'll wait to see if anyone else adopts this.
Yeah,
So-
I come from California, even though I moved to Austin a couple years ago. My whole culture and upbringing is California and Silicon Valley mentality. The California farmers, by the way, the trifecta of the valleys, Salinas Valley, Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and Napa Valley, that's a $15 billion a year industry. And they are as smart as you can get. And they come to people who create solutions or invest in solutions, and they tell you, we want to buy these technologies, but please make it this way. So the farmer is out there and they want to buy things. I mean, it's evident in Silicon Valley. They want to buy your technologies if it improves their margin.
Right. It's
Simple.
all about return on investment. That's one of the things that we always try to emphasize ultimately to our farmer buyers, who, by the way, are the trilogy you just mentioned. So they want to know what the input costs are, what the input costs are versus what they're currently using now, what's the return on investment, how many seasons it's going to take to see results on things that are very data driven. So the clients that we're talking to, they want to see the results, aggregate data results coming from trusted third parties. That gets you in the door, but then they want to test on their own farms to make sure that it's working before they start the whole buying sales cycle. But it's very much driven by input pricing, and that's what improves the margins ultimately for them.
I heard a comment from a ag advisor recently that was a farmer in the red will never go green. And the point is, when thinking about sustainability or thinking about carbon as an example, there's a lot of upfront cost. And so if you're not making the economic argument to them, they're just trying to survive. They're not going to care as much about the social argument. But if you go and you say, hey, you should take on these regenerative practices because it's going to increase your water retention. It's going to increase your soil biodiversity, which is going to increase the amount of grass you can grow. It's going to improve the diversity of what you can sell. It's going to, there's like a million, reduce your input costs. There's a million arguments you can make that resonate with the way that they're already thinking about their business versus, I think it's so important that you lead with the economics.
Right, and it can't be in the abstract. I mean, the whole talk about GHGs to a farmer, their eyes are going to glaze over. But if you talk about their soil quality, the microbiome that you're making more healthy, reduced runoffs of nitrogen, which infects their water, the increased porosity of the soil so it can capture the water when it comes. All these things resonate with the farmers. But you don't start off with the big, the world is, suffering from climate change. You talk about the impact on their farm and how it resonates with them.
We see that. We represent a lot of large co-ops and producers, and the conversion, Kevin hit the nail on the head. Most of the trade secrets and their data is here, and they're very hesitant to open that up. Co-ops are a way to help that. The co-ops all get together. If somebody has a great idea that gets adopted, you see more widespread adoption. But I saw a commercial not long ago of a farmer in this beautiful farm walking with an iPad looking at every data point on the farm. And altruistically, that is ultimately where I think Agtech wants to go. But it's the adoption and the conversion rate of people who say, I've got my whole business up here, why am I going to open this up at potentially my expense and my family's expense? Because these are all mostly generational family businesses. You get the hesitation.
And change is hard.
Yeah.
Like change management is 50% of what we do. And we've been doing this for 7 generations this way, and you're asking me to put it on my phone? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. It's easy to critique the customer, but I give the exact same excuses when someone's like, why don't you use this tool? And I'm like, I don't have time, I'm too busy. It's hard.
And farmers are incredibly busy, and they've got the tight margins. So there's not that margin for error. They really need to see the proof. They really want to see the data. We're now using a lot of infrared satellite or drone pictures to show ahead of time. Here's the data that we have, and the farmers are starting to resonate that because they're seeing that more and more.
This lady has a.
Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Lynn Bruning. I'm a 5th generation landowner from New York State. We began dairy farming in the Civil War. In New York State, more than 50% of land that is farmed is leased land. So as the energy industry is coming in, so say a farmer is leasing this land for $100 an acre, and as the energy industry is coming in and saying, we'll give you $1,000 per acre inside the fence for a solar array, how is all of this going to impact? Because obviously many farmers are generationally old, their children have left the state, and they are more than willing to take the $1,000 as opposed to getting up and working from dusk to dawn. And how's that going to impact what you do? How can you help them?
The farmers.
We have an interesting bell curve of our customers. So we've got a ton of customers that are kind of in the late 30s, early 40s. Effectively, they've gone through the generational transition. They've taken over. They want to do something new. And then we have this trail off down in the 60s, 70s. And then we have a big spike in the late 70s, 80s. And often what that is people who are like, this isn't for me. This is for the next generation. I want to show them that we can run this as a meaningful business and we can get more out of that acre and try and prevent this continued exodus from the country to the city that's happening. But it is hard. It's a difficult economic decision. You have to really love what you're doing to take the $100 over the $1,000. And I don't have a great answer. I wish I did because we see it all the time.
Yeah, and it's
It's-
international. It's,
yeah,
you know,
100%.
And it's just, it's going to increase.
Yeah.
But you know, I think this recent food shortages that we are so unaccustomed to seeing, that could change things. I don't know how, I don't know when, but food is such a primal need. It's not negotiable. So I think what I see, the big picture, from a geopolitical perspective, I see every man for himself coming up on the horizon, because we are going to deglobalize and have onshoring for our food, for essentials, energy, food, and things like that. So I think things would change. I don't know how or when.
One thing I think that does play to the favor in this is that consumer habits are changing from, I think, I forget the exact numbers, but there was a stat that like in the 70s, people spent 12 or 13% of their disposable income on food. Now it's 5%. There was always a push in agriculture over the years, particularly during World War II when the labor force was reduced, of how do we maximize efficiency and reduce cost. And what I'm seeing, and I see it reflected in the requests from supermarkets, is people are more discerning now. People are willing to spend a little bit more, not across the board, but the trend is going up of people saying, I do care about what's going to my food. I am willing to pay a little bit more for it. I do want to support the local farmer rather than the giant multinational. And I see a shift away from just pure consolidation and pure efficiency towards how do we get more direct from farm to consumer happening? How do we cut out the middleman? I mean, we talked about, prices in the beef industry are at an all-time high, and none of it goes to the producer. It's all getting gobbled up by the packers. It's all getting gobbled up on these downstream operators. How do you shift that? Why do they have such a chokehold? They're not adding value, they're middlemen, and there's a lot of ways you can remove them, and that's where I think technology can play. They can give market access to a small producer that would normally be dependent on those middlemen. It can give you the ability to create a brand, which you can then charge a premium for. None of these are singular solutions that are going to change the game, but I think there's a lot of things that can happen that can disintermediate, that can then bring more value to the producer and make it more economically viable to stay on farm.
So kind of related to that, is anybody getting into like vertical integration so that at the end user, at the consumer facing side, those companies are looking way upstream as well so all their production is vertically integrated with the company instead of all, like you said, all these individual producers, and everybody's taking a cut, everybody's taking their own profits rather than trying to produce it all yourself and control all of those entities along the way to the consumer side. We're doing that on the energy side. We're a vertically integrated aviation company producing our own fuels, right? So we're kind of in tension with there's a lot of tension between what we're doing and what you're talking about. But vertical integration here seems like a solution to a lot of just those problems that you're talking about, where everybody's taking a cut of this along the way. So is there any of that happening in this industry?
Well, there's an awful lot of actually new interest in supply chain and logistics technology. That's one of the most active areas of funding in Agtech right now. So by coming up with solution in logistics and supply chain, you tend to encourage things to be vertically integrated, basically.
And more efficient.
More efficient, yeah. Which also removes, as to your point, removing the many middlemen. That means the farmer may get a little bit more of the share of the profits.
I'm working on that. I don't know if it's increasing or not, but we definitely work with a lot of our integrated producers, and they tend to be our most profitable ones because of exactly that.
Hi guys, my name is So I'd love to hear from you guys' side, and Daniel and Kevin, on actually building a company and then what you see from the investment perspective with your portfolio companies. But given the resistance just to overall adoption, how does that affect product development, and how do you manage that? Because I'm assuming, like, I'm an investor actually, so I see a lot of SaaS companies, right? They just burn cash, they want to hit scale. But just given that you're probably not going to see as fast of adoption, I'm assuming you have to be a lot more capital efficient than the majority of like enterprise SaaS companies. So I would just love to hear about how you look thinking about that and then what you see with your portfolio companies as well.
Sure, might as well. You're absolutely right. It's a longer sales cycle that you have to manage for, so you have to have enough cash to make it through that longer cycle. We were kind of at a breakfast a little bit earlier talking about sharing some stories, and it's exactly that. You need to have enough cash to make it through that longer sales cycle. You also have to have your investor audience recognize that it's going to take a longer time to get that traction that you really want to see. So it's not going to be exponential growth. What you can do on a short-term basis is you can constantly be collecting data from trusted third-party sources. Because what we found is that the data drives where we can solve problems. So we found through going through metagenomic studies, working with third parties, we found what was really driving the behavior of our product. And that's where we said, oh, okay, there's iron uptake, there's manganese uptake, there's zinc uptake. That's a different value proposition than a lot of the bigger players that are super well funded, but there's still a large problem with iron deficiency around the world. So now that we have those data, and we can collect those data in a relatively short amount of time, just a season or so, and you can take that to investors and show them that data, which again is validated by third parties, trusted third parties, you then can take that, use that as a sales proposition for the actual farmers themselves. So it's a step-by-step process, and I'm sure it's different for every niche, but we've been very data-driven from day one. And that's how we built our credibility in shorter time frames.
It's a good question, and we're 100% SaaS. I think what he said in the beginning is spot on. It's hard to buy growth in this space. You have to earn that growth and use your capital efficiently to create it. But I think also something I've always felt about this question is it's not that different from a lot of industries. I think that we lionize the Slacks or the Dropboxes or whoever, these companies that created super crazy hyper viral growth, but like selling change is hard, and selling software to people is hard. It's no different in ag tech than it is in med tech or legal tech or construction tech, or there's any number of industries where people are not aggressive tech adopters. So I think the principles, and one thing that we always try to do is try to not get too fixated on farmers are this and farmers are that, and just be like, this is a person who's running a business that wants their business to be run better. And look at the best SaaS companies in the world. How did they do it? How did they solve that problem? They've sold into a niche space. What did they do? And so I try to always not get too sucked into the rabbit hole of like, oh, farmers will do this, farmers do Y. As a quick story, when we started, everyone was like, the only way you can sell to farmers is newspaper ads and going to trade shows. Yeah, and we did that. And then one day we were like, let's put a Google ad up. Bang, immediately started selling. Let's put a Facebook ad up. Bang, immediately started selling. And now we're 100% inbound. So, challenge the assumptions of what farmers really want to do. Moderator.
Please.
Hi guys, my name is Jacob Cordova, founder and CEO of Bright Yeti. We invented ion technology. Farmers can push a button and increase their yields within an hour with our treatments to their seeds. We're in multiple states now, Colorado, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, and just landed a major strategic partner. My question for you guys is, when you're working with strategic partners for distribution, people that have thousands of people in their network of farmers, millions of acres underneath their belt, that's the rocket ship we've been building for. We've already done over 450 internal trials on our technology and have had third-party validation data showing that our impact on yields is 3 times higher than the farmers expected it to be. So we're really excited about where we're going next. And we're looking at the different strategic partners we can add in addition to the one that we just landed. What is your thought on strategic partnerships with groups like Indigo Ag, Farmers Business Network, things like that, and how that can help scale technology?
I have thoughts from the software perspective. You have a slightly different space, so I'm keen to get yours.
We do work with strategic partners, but we had exactly the same thing. We have to test with them. They have to see the results themselves, and then they have their own distribution. Like Farmers Business Network essentially is a retail platform, so the farmers can go directly there. what I like about it is it's transparent pricing. You can see all the inputs. So I think it's a very novel, but their business model essentially is you have to work with them. You pay them to do trials on their own farms, or their farmers. So you build the validation that way. And that's a terrific way. But we're also doing B2B, which is basically working with third parties where they're taking our input and testing it with their own products, and then they have their own distribution networks. So obviously it takes a huge chunk of margin away from you when you work with these third parties, but you do have access to their distribution networks. And as a young company, that's what you really need. So congratulations.
So,
I have a question for you. What is your product that increases the yield of what? 3 times?
and are you open for fundraising?
Yeah, I'm curious. Tell me about your product and how it increases. What crops get 3 times the yield?
Yeah, sure. So it's 3 times the expected increase in what we get deployed at and what people have signed up for and paid for. Farmers were anticipating 4 to 7 bushels an acre increase with our tech. We saw over 17 bushels an acre with the third-party independent trials. It's ion technology. So
I'm sorry, what is it?
My background spans
Ion.
we did some medical device technology in a consulting firm that I ran for a while. But my foundation began with NASA on the Orion Manned Spaceflight Program. And one of the things that we had to do was control the environments for astronauts so that they could survive on the way to the moon and to Mars. And one of the big pieces that came into mind was we have to protect them from electromagnetic fields out in space. The sun is always emitting things our direction. Once you leave far enough away from the Earth, you're no longer protected by the Earth's EMF. We had to protect astronauts inside the spacecraft from that. Fast forward to where we were a few years ago. For the first time in the existence of humanity, just a handful of years ago, the European Space Agency gathered data to map the Earth's electromagnetic field in high resolution more than it had ever been done before. And the big assumption that was out there was the electromagnetic field on the Earth is what it is wherever you are. No matter what you're doing, there's nothing that you need to do about that. It's just pointing north. We called out that assumption about 5 years ago and put together a National Science Foundation proposal to test this on tomato plants and saw an incredible yield response to that and have always really driven our path forward towards food. So, what is ion technology? If you've ever been to the hospital and had an MRI done, doctors use MRIs to take images of your body by controlling the electromagnetic field around you. We use similar technology that we've developed, patented, or going through the patent process internationally, where we're energizing the metabolic rates in the seed before it goes to the ground. So our technology is like an ion technology used by doctors, except we're applying it to plants.
You apply it to the seeds.
That's right.
In furrow.
Yeah, 100% upstream, directly working with the farmers, working with some distribution partners now, and everything that we can do to help empower the farmers to increase their yields, be more efficient at what they're doing, and reap those benefits. The numbers show that we're 7 times more efficient than adding more land. And the average farmer can increase their yields as though they added 100 acres without actually needing an extra 100 acres to get those yields.
ROI.
ROI.
That's awesome. I have maybe a slightly different take, but again, appropriate grain of salt, as I'm not doing something that's that specific and that ROI direct. But the 2 things I would caution are that giant corporate partners can gobble you up. Like, you are a small company and they are enormous, and they can like eat companies alive. And I've seen it happen. I've seen companies become totally dependent and basically, end up getting sold for nothing or like whatever, because the oxygen was all sucked out of the room by that corporate partner who was trying to make them happy. The second thing is, make sure you can sell it yourself first. They can be incredible for distribution. We've got some great distribution partners, but don't just sort of say, okay, we've got this, like the sales game is over. Like, you still have to brand your product, market your product, create that pitch. They can send out some people that will put it alongside what they're already selling, but as big as they are, as good as their distribution is, the individual on the ground needs to make money. And if they're gonna make more money selling this bag of fertilizer over here or this bag of seed over here, they're gonna do that because that's how their commissions are structured. And we've learned that horribly the hard way. Like, if it's not the easiest thing for them to sell with the highest margins can make them the most money, it doesn't matter what head office thinks, the people on the ground do not give a. So those would be my cautions. Like, it is a great thing, congratulations, but don't rest now. Like it's not a panacea.
Completely agree. I mean, when you're dealing with distributors, they're the client. Basically, you have to offer them the incentives. It's got to work. They're on a commission basis, so they want to sell, and they're going to go for the highest margin. So they are eating quite a bit of margin. But we use a portfolio approach. It's not just one distributor. We use multiple distributors, and to B2B, same thing. We're talking. Well, we're now trialing with more than half a dozen B2B clients because you don't want to be dependent on that one player who's just going to squeeze you.
Yep.
And you've got to have options.
Can we talk later about the distributors that you mentioned?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just to Kevin's point on this, from a legal perspective, we represent those large companies. We also represent entrepreneurs. And that is real, right? You want to have the flexibility and the control that if the interest is there, you want to maximize every penny.
Sure.
If your interest and the winds blow some other way, you want to have the ability to potentially put that to bed.
Never go
And
exclusive.
so,
Right.
yeah, those
Never
type
go
of things.
exclusive.
Never do exclusive.
Portfolio.
In a prior life, I was with a multi-billion-dollar
Never do
public food
exclusive.
company, and we did just that. Whatever was the hot trend, we looked into, and we made sure we had the right control parameters around those supply agreements or control investments or even minority investments to dictate whatever it is we wanted at that point. Similarly, when we represent entrepreneurs, we know those pitfalls, and we represent against them. But they're very key in understanding, especially as you go up the food chain in the large corporations, those wins change very often. And if it doesn't make financial sense to commercialize that at any given moment, you see a disinterest. So what may be hot and heavy at one moment is they won't return my call. So just a little plug for the legal documents.
But I mean, fair enough. Like, get a good lawyer because they have
Exactly.
a team of lawyers that know all these weird esoteric terms, Clause 73C. Like, you need someone who can look at a document and say, this is where you're going to come unstuck. Cause,
Always have a good lawyer,
Yeah,
right?
so,
Good lawyers are
Okay,
super
okay.
important.
things I never thought I'd say, but not enough bad experiences.
Couple more minutes.
No,
yes.
we said good lawyers.
Good lawyers. Good lawyers.
Not just any lawyers, good lawyers.
Good lawyers.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you guys could speak a little bit to what Agtech looks like in developing countries.
Oh, yeah. Amazing, amazing. I just read an article this morning before I showed up here that Africa reached $1 billion investment in Agtech. Africa. I mean, to me, that's heartwarming. That's, the middle class has been expanding in Asia at a very rapid pace, and that's why Agtech is as hot as it is because of that. And the protein demand is so high, so all these plant-based proteins. Now Africa is another big population that is moving into middle class, and they want to be self-sufficient, they want to grow their own food. Women are playing a big role in that. So actually, in Africa, we have portfolio companies in India, and they are some of the best companies. So it's exciting to be in Agtech in developing countries.
Yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity in the future. One structural advantage in developing countries is a lot of them are mobile first and almost like skip the landline phase. You look at Africa as an example, right? Like mobile payments have been a thing forever. So there are some advantages. The challenge obviously is you need to get extreme scale. The willingness to pay or the ability to pay may not be as high. You may not understand. I've heard some horror stories about issues with what happens with the governments, or we operate a lot in South Africa. Like what happens with the rand every day has huge impact on us, like stability of currency. So there are challenges, but I do think it's a massive opportunity. It's a massive need for the world. So if you can get around those challenges and crack it, I think that's pretty incredible.
I happen to serve on the board of the World Food Program Accelerator. And the accelerator sort of accelerates companies that are specifically for developing countries. They're sort of low-tech technologies that are easy to implement and give it to farmers that are small 1-2 acre lots. And that's probably the most rewarding part of my life, to see these small low-tech getting in the hand of smallholders in developing countries. There a lot is happening there, a lot.
And let's not forget Latin America. I mean, Brazil is an agriculture superpower, largest soybean producer, one of the largest in orange production, chickens. I mean, it's across the board. We have an office in Brazil, and we're talking to some of the largest, or trialing now with some of the largest Brazilian players. So it's all around the world, all around these emerging markets. What we have to look at is, of course, the price point for the ultimate end user. It's different than you're going to see in the States. So you do have to think about your production costs and how you're going to meet that price point in the market, particularly with smaller players, and the distribution network that's necessary to reach that end user.
I
You have
was
to
gonna
think of
say,
all those different.
In our experience, developing countries are where the partnerships actually are the most valuable, because it's one thing to get the distribution network, it's another thing to, looking at Brazil,
right.
Every province has its own tax regime. Like the complexities, the legal,
Just setting up an office.
Just literally setting up a business over there is impossible. So if you can have an arm's length counterparty who can be there and you can work through that, that's actually a massive tick for the power of partnerships.
Right.
We coming up on time? You have a question?
I do.
Yes.
Keeping on the global trend, I grew up in a farming community in Australia, recently come from New Zealand, and so when I hear these statements like technological adoption is really, it's a difficulty. It's very different from what I saw in New Zealand, which is almost like they now have fully automated dairy farms. It's actually unbelievable. As a foreigner, can you explain some of the uniquely American characteristics of the Agtech industry?
I will say this, New Zealand is like, in my experience, leading the world.
Yes, they are. I agree with you. They're amazing. They're
Kiwis.
amazing. The Kiwis, yeah, they're amazing. Kiwis are amazing. And they're nice, Americans could be amazing, but we are not necessarily nice.
And there's a lot of ways to go. I'll jump on one. One thing that we learned the hard way coming in here is the state-based parochialism. So like, you come to you go to Australia where we started, and like, it's just Australia. You come here, and if you're in Texas and you're not affiliated with Texas A&M, but with Kansas State, they're gonna look at you funny. And there's like these weird regional things that like genuinely matter. Like we've gotten really close here, and a thing we never even dreamed of. We've gotten really close to all the extension ag universities because it matters, and it matters. The first thing that some of them will do is go back up their alumni network and be like, hey, do we know of this company? And so that's that. I mean, I can think of a few more, but
No, exactly, and also the regulatory regime, because we have to get passed through the regulatory regime of each state, and some are relatively straightforward. California, of course, has the highest standards, so you have to jump through more hoops to get. But it's just the sheer number of dealing with 50 different states and trying to get the checkoff for each one of those states to be able to sell into those states.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, New Zealand has very special characteristics that plays well for their ag system. Yeah.
I think another thing that I've seen, and this could be sample size bias, I don't know, but in Australia and New Zealand, the producers we interact with are very much, they view themselves as business people. Like, they are business people first, whereas in the US, particularly because we deal with ranchers, they're kind of a lot of cowboy first mentality we'll sometimes encounter. And how that can take shape economically is far fewer of our customers here have debt. And so their economic equation is slightly different. They're not loan servicing and doing things like that, which changes kind of how they view it. In the UK, it's a whole different environment. A lot of people in the UK that are farmers actually, we learned quickly that the profitability message didn't resonate with a lot of people because a lot of them use the land as a massive tax write-off and they actually want it to be cash flow negative. So it's like, there's all these weird, like perverse economic incentives that exist in different areas that change how people think about their business and operating.
Look, I want to be respectful of people's time. We've come to the top of the hour. We want to thank you all for joining us. The panel will stick around for a little bit to discuss kind of individual questions, but certainly we thank you. This would not be possible without all your attendance. So on behalf of the The moderator, panelists, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.